broadcast in 5 different languages on Channel Africa: English, French, Portuguese, Chinyanja, and Kiswahili. And you can catch us on www.channelafrica.co.za. Currently, we are in conversation with Karabo Lediga about her latest body of work called Sabbatical. Karabo, take us through this film. What is it about? I mean, we touched on it, but I think you are best to tell us more about it.
The film is a love letter, I guess, a quirky, funny, dramatic love letter to Black African mother-daughter relationships. It starts off with a banker, quite successful, Joburg-based, a corporate hun, waking up in a childhood bedroom, not quite knowing how she got there, and not in a state in which a mother would approve of. And when she tries to go back to her high life in Johannesburg, she realizes that she can't leave. She's gotten into trouble at work and can't quite tell her mother what the trouble is, because her mother raised her to be the successful person and to be as far away from the life that she grew up in as possible, as our mothers do. But now when trouble is upon her in her life, she's unable to kind of tell her mother that there's a little bit of a failure in the mix, So a lot of it is kind of like a tense, but sometimes funny and awkward kind of relationship between mother and daughter. And in the middle of it is a huge secret that's going to change this relationship forever, And I was quite interested in talking about gaps, generational gaps, but the gap between this great life in fancy Johannesburg and where we come from, and in this instance, it's just Pretoria, which is not even an hour away, but it's like such a long way away, Basically, that's the film, yeah.
Shoo. So the complexities, Karabo, that are raised in this film, they are various. The complexities of living in or trying to build something, make something of your family in post-apartheid South Africa as the young, upwardly mobile individual who feels a sense of duty because of what the parents had to go through, right, working tirelessly. I wonder how much of that story or that narrative, that complexity in particular, stems from your own personal experience. You were raised by a single mother. How much of the story draws from your personal experience?
So I'm an artist, I'm a filmmaker, and my mom was quite encouraging of it. I started studying mechanical engineering, and she was like, "What? But you're a good writer. You write," and so she was really supportive of my creative career.
That's quite different.
Yeah, so she's quite unique, and it's an unusual story. So I'd like to honor that, But other than that, I guess I am interested in my relationship with my mother in terms of our culture, I was raised in her culture, whatever that is, because my mom really grew up in Atteridgeville. She'd like to think that she's, deeper than that. But, she's like, a woman from the hood. Sometimes, really, she likes to think it's more serious. But there is a way that we're raised quite community focused, respect your elders and, the ideas of kind of like more of an African-centered sort of life, but then we're thrust into white schools, for lack of a better word, or I guess multiracial schools as we called it in the day, and we are asked to learn a new culture and become, shapeshifters, people who are this way at school and people who are this way at home, and eventually people who are this way at work and people who are this way at home, And there is a cultural shift between generations, especially my mom's and my own. She grew up in apartheid, and I really, most of it didn't, So I was interested in these cultural clashes. I thought them funny, like what time do you wake up? When do you get married? When do you have children? How do you cook mohodu? Did you wipe the counter? Did you wash dishes? The smallness and the bigness of this culture clash. And we really don't understand each other. We love each other, but I don't think we understand each other. My mom is, kind of better. She kind of leans into, my hashtag whatever wokeness. Now she can say, Karabo, I'm not body shaming, but don't you think the skirt is a little bit short? I was like, okay, you got one part right, but you're still body shaming. So I'm interested in this kind of, the tension between the two generations.
Yeah.
And I really truly believe that, our parents tried, but they don't understand why we complain about our current state of living, Who depressed, unale anxiety, you get burnout, So they worked hard, so they expect us to kind of reap the benefits of their hard work. But we try to explain the complexities of these worlds we have to kind of fit into, which are not our own, unfortunately.
Karabo, when we look at Lesego's story in the film, how does it challenge our ideas of success? Because in actual fact, who gets to define that?
Yeah. I think that's such a great question, because it literally was the central theme of this film. And especially if we look at where the world is now in 2025. There's like historically been an emphasis on success being kind of monetary and material.
Yeah.
But I'm really of the opinion that the more we look at the world and societies like currently, the more we realize that perhaps success might be different, and I'd like to offer community or as success, having people, being surrounded by people you can lean on. Sometimes it sounds like so cheesy, but I think the more people get successful, the more they're isolated, because there are only so few places for success here. There's only this many, Channel Africas, there's only this many, corporate banks. We all can fit into this thing. So there are few of us, there's one Beyonce, there's one Rihanna. It's not a communal success, And I think we need to start thinking about maybe going back to a little bit of togetherness. There's something in the way our parents kind of raised us and the way they live that's perhaps healthier, I think chasing stuff is quite isolating. So yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I answered your question. Sometimes I get carried away, but yeah.
No, you did. You did. Thank you so much for that. You did.
We do have to take a break, though, and we're hoping that you are able to stay with us, Karabo, beyond this, the business news as well as sports. So let's take a quick break into the sports news, and we'll continue the conversation with Karabo Lediga right on.